What if I told you that where you scatter someone's ashes could affect not just how they're remembered, but where their soul travels next? It's a thought that most people never consider. In the middle of grief, you're trying to do what feels right, something meaningful, something respectful. You're honoring a life lived. You choose a place that seems beautiful, peaceful, maybe symbolic, a beach where they loved to walk, a mountain they once climbed, a quiet place that reminds you of who they were. But what if the spiritual impact of that location mattered more than the memory it holds? What if choosing the wrong place could tether their spirit in confusion rather than setting it free? When someone we love dies, we face more than the pain of losing them. We're faced with the responsibility of guiding them into what comes next. We think of funerals, eulogies, flowers. But in spiritual reality, the choices we make after death carry an energetic imprint. You may not see it, but the soul still feels it. And while ashes may appear as nothing more than what remains of the physical, they carry with them traces of memory, emotion, vibration. Where those ashes are placed becomes a kind of energetic address, an anchor point in the subtle realms. It's not just symbolic, it's directional. It sets a course for where the soul might linger, release, or rise. You wouldn't place a newborn in a chaotic, unfamiliar space without protection. Yet, many do the spiritual equivalent with the dead. We scatter ashes at intersections, on bustling roads, in places full of unresolved grief, or entertainment and noise. Not because we're careless, but because we've never been told otherwise. We've never been taught that the soul's journey doesn't end at death. It transitions. And just like a plane needs a clear runway to lift off, the spirit needs energetic clarity to ascend. Without it, the soul can become disoriented, not because it is lost, but because the frequencies surrounding it are too loud, too discordant, or simply misaligned with its natural path upward. Energy is everywhere, in every space, every object, every memory. You feel it all the time, even if you don't realize you do. You walk into a room and sense heaviness. You meet someone and instinctively feel drawn or repelled. That's energy. And just as you are sensitive to it, so is the soul, especially in the vulnerable moments after death, when it is shedding the density of the physical body and trying to remember itself as pure consciousness. If the environment around the remains is energetically chaotic or unclear, the soul may cling to familiar vibrations out of confusion. It's like waking up from a dream and not knowing where you are. This is why the location matters. Ashes are not inert. They are symbolic, yes, but also vibrational. They mark a space where energy converges. That space, whether it's a serene forest or a busy parking lot, holds frequencies that either uplift or obstruct the soul's movement into higher dimensions. The difference between scattering ashes on sacred ground versus a site of unresolved trauma is not just emotional, it's metaphysical, and no one ever tells you this. There's an invisible fabric that connects spirit, space, and memory. Imagine trying to fall asleep in a room where the television blares, lights flicker, and strangers come and go. Now imagine trying to meditate in a quiet temple, incense in the air, soft music in the background. One pulls you in a dozen directions, the other invites you inward. The soul, in its post-death transition, is far more sensitive to this than we are in waking life. Where we place ashes can be the difference between a smooth release and a delayed detachment. And here's something even more sobering. Sometimes the places we choose are more about comforting ourselves than serving the departed. We want to hold on. We want a piece of them close. We want the ritual to feel personal, nostalgic. But death is not a time to cling. It is a time to open. The soul, once freed from the body, doesn't need memory. It needs movement. It needs space. It needs clarity. Your love remains with them no matter where their ashes go. But their liberation may depend on whether you chose a location that supports expansion or one that reinforces attachment. You may be thinking, but how do I know which places are right and which are wrong? That's what this journey is about. Over the next chapters, we'll walk through the most common places people scatter ashes, and why some of them, despite good intentions, may be deeply unsupportive for the soul's transition. These aren't rules meant to scare you. They're revelations meant to empower you. Because when you understand the spiritual terrain of the after-death experience, You make choices from clarity rather than habit. You become not just someone honoring the dead, but someone assisting in their rebirth into higher realms. This knowledge isn't new. Across cultures, indigenous shamans, Eastern mystics, ancient texts, and spiritual teachers have all spoken of the importance of vibrational alignment in death rituals. Many traditional societies were highly intentional about burial grounds, sacred directions, ceremonial prayers, even the time of day when the body should be handled. Why? Because they knew what modern culture often forgets, that death is not an end, but a doorway, and how you open that door determines what the soul finds on the other side. You're not just saying goodbye when you scatter ashes, you're setting something into motion. The question is, what direction is it headed? If you want to offer your loved one peace, if you want to honor not just their memory, but their evolution, then the first step is awareness. And that awareness begins with recognizing that not every beautiful place is spiritually safe, not every sentimental location is energetically clear. There are places on this earth where energy is tangled, unsettled, or too turbulent to guide a soul upward. And while your heart may feel drawn to those places for personal reasons, the soul deserves more than sentiment, it deserves sanctuary. In the chapters ahead, we'll look deeply into these unseen dynamics, the energy patterns of crossroads, cemeteries, water, trauma sites, and more. You'll learn what creates dissonance and what creates release. You'll learn how to discern with wisdom, how to honor with reverence, how to let go, not in fear, but in light. And perhaps most importantly, you'll learn how to make peace not just with your loved one's death, but with your own role in helping them ascend. What if I told you that ashes are not simply the remains of a body, but the lingering echo of a soul's earthly vibration? That long after the physical form has returned to dust, something subtle yet powerful remains, something that still responds to energy, intention, and environment. When someone passes on, what's left behind isn't just bone and dust. What's left is an imprint, a condensed signature of everything they were, emotionally, energetically, even spiritually. You see, your body is made of energy. Every thought you've had, every emotion you've felt, every action you've taken, it's all vibrational, and that vibration doesn't just disappear at death. It shifts, it loosens, it begins to move out of form and back into formlessness. But in that in-between space, what many call transition, the vibrational remnants still resonate. They're like the ripples left in water after a stone has been thrown. The stone may be gone, but the waves, they linger. And those ashes you hold in your hands, or place into an urn, or scatter on the wind, they still carry the echo of those waves. This is why the place where you scatter those ashes matters more than most people ever realize. It's not about choosing a location that looks peaceful, it's about choosing a location that feels energetically clear. Because those ashes are not simply symbolic, they are reactive. They carry with them a kind of frequency, and that frequency can either harmonize with the place where they're laid to rest, or clash with it. When you scatter ashes, you're not just performing a ritual, you're anchoring a vibration, and that anchor either supports the soul's journey upward, or holds it tethered to the earthly plane in ways it may not understand. Think of it like a spacecraft preparing to leave Earth. Everything in that launch, every angle, every measurement, every condition, must be aligned for it to ascend properly. If there's resistance, miscalculation, or interference in the atmosphere, it doesn't rise smoothly. It gets pulled back, it spins, it burns out. Now imagine the soul as that spacecraft. Death is the ignition, but the ashes, where they are placed, can either help create lift or create drag. They can be a launch pad or a gravitational pull. The idea may sound strange at first. After all, we're told that once someone dies, they're gone, their soul moves on, their spirit is free. But what if that's only half the truth? What if that freedom is not automatic, but conditional? What if the soul's release depends in part on what we, the living, do with what remains? Every environment holds a unique energetic field. A forest has a different frequency than a city. A battlefield holds different vibrations than a temple. A home filled with mourning holds different energy than a sacred mountain where prayers have been spoken for centuries. So, when you place ashes somewhere, you're not just returning them to the earth. you're merging their vibration with the energy of that space. If that space is peaceful, spiritually neutral, or blessed, the soul's energy can disperse easily. But if that space is chaotic, dense, or emotionally charged, the ashes can become magnets for confusion, entanglement, or stagnation. It's not about superstition, it's about resonance. Just as tuning forks vibrate in harmony or discord depending on how they're struck, so too do the ashes resonate with the places we place them. If you leave them in a spot that's filled with unresolved trauma, the soul might sense that pain and stay close, trying to soothe it, even if it doesn't belong to them. If you place them near places that held deep attachments, homes, possessions, relationships, they might linger out of loyalty, trying to hold on instead of letting go. This isn't punishment, it's compassion. The soul often tries to stay close to what it loves, but the journey after death is meant to be expansive, not repetitive. If the ashes are placed in a setting that reinforces past identity, memory, or suffering, the soul may not rise. It may recycle, hover, wander. It may keep circling the same emotional terrain it was meant to transcend. Not because it wants to be stuck, but because we, unknowingly, gave it no runway to fly. Ashes are a bridge between form and formlessness, between the world that was and the world that waits. And the way we honor that bridge determines what the soul sees as it crosses. Is it stepping into clarity, or into confusion, into light, or into longing? You might think, ashes are just dust, how can they hold anything? But everything holds frequency. Your voice holds it. Your thoughts hold it. Your touch holds it. The object you wear every day absorbs your energy. Why wouldn't ashes, the very remains of your physical vessel, carry the essence of all you once were? This is why the ritual matters. Not just the scattering, but the energy behind it. Did you bless the ashes? Did you speak to the soul? Did you choose the place with reverence and clarity? Or was it done quickly, emotionally, without spiritual consideration? These questions aren't about guilt, they're about awareness. When you know better, you do better. And right now, more than ever, humanity is being called to remember that everything is energy, including the way we say goodbye. It's not about fear, it's about responsibility. If you loved someone enough to grieve for them, then love them enough to release them wisely. Don't bind them to a place that only holds your pain. Don't leave them in locations chosen out of convenience, tradition, or pressure. Choose with your heart, yes, but also with your soul. Ask yourself, is this place peaceful? Is it energetically still? Is it somewhere that supports release or reinforces attachment? The ashes are not what's left of the person, they are what's left of their presence. And presence, even after death, is sacred. How you handle it sends a message. It says, you're free now. Or it says, stay with me. And while the heart may long to keep them close, the spirit longs to rise. Your role is not to hold them down, but to help them rise higher than they ever could in life. So, the next time you hold those ashes in your hands, feel the weight beyond the physical, feel the frequency that still lingers. Know that what you do next is more than a memorial. It is a message across dimensions, a signal that says, your journey continues now, and I trust it will lead you to peace. That trust, that love, released rather than clung to, becomes the wind beneath the wings of the soul. And when that happens, ashes are no longer just remnants of what was, they become the launching point for what's still becoming. Have you ever stood at a crossroads and felt something strange? Maybe you've paused at a quiet intersection, no cars, no people, just an eerie stillness, a subtle heaviness in the air that you couldn't quite explain. There's a reason these places have always stirred something in the human psyche. Since ancient times, crossroads have been regarded as mysterious thresholds, gateways between worlds. They symbolize choice, transition, and movement, yes, but they also carry a deeper, often unsettling energy. And when it comes to scattering ashes, they may be one of the worst places you could choose. On the surface, a crossroads might seem harmless, even symbolic. You might think of it as representing freedom, a place where all paths are open, where the soul can choose any direction it desires. But in spiritual reality, too much choice, without clarity, can become a prison. Crossroads are not peaceful, they are potent, And for a soul in transition, that potency can turn into paralysis. Every intersection is an energetic convergence. Paths meet, energies overlap, timelines collide. Think of it like electricity. Where wires cross, there is more voltage, more chaos, more charge. Crossroads are no different. They're like energetic whirlpools, pulling in vibrations from multiple directions at once, and while the living may simply pass through them, for a soul that has just left the body, the experience is very different. In that delicate moment after death, the spirit seeks orientation. It wants to rise, to move forward, but at a crossroads, nothing is clear. Everything pulls at once. Up becomes sideways. Forward becomes fragmented. The soul doesn't know which path is the path. This is not metaphorical. Energetically, crossroads are unstable. They hold conflicting vibrations, drawn from all who have passed through, rushed, angry, grieving, lost, hopeful, distracted. Imagine a room where 5 conversations are happening at once, different languages, different emotions, all overlapping. Now, imagine trying to meditate in that room. You wouldn't find stillness, you'd find noise. That's what the soul encounters at a crossroads, a place where stillness is drowned out by energetic interference. Ancient cultures knew this. That's why crossroads have always been treated with a strange mix of reverence and caution. In many traditions, they were seen as portals between the physical and the spiritual. Offerings were left there for spirits. Rituals were performed to send the dead safely on their way. But it wasn't because the crossroads were holy, it was because they were dangerous. Folklore from nearly every continent speaks of crossroads as haunted spaces, places where spirits linger, where ghosts lose their way. Not because they're evil, but because they're confused. The energy there is too divided, too undecided. When ashes are scattered at a crossroads, the soul may become caught in that confusion. Instead of rising into light, it circles the intersection, unsure of which path leads to peace. The spirit tries one direction, then doubles back. It senses freedom, but it can't find focus. It feels pulled, not guided. And just like a person lost in a maze, it begins to lose its own orientation. It forgets what it was moving toward. It forgets what it is. This isn't about punishment. It's about pattern. Energy follows structure. And crossroads, by nature, lack structure. They're designed for physical navigation, not spiritual ascension. The living use them to change direction. The dead need something else entirely: clarity, stillness, harmony. They don't need more roads, they need the road. One clear, intentional path into the higher dimensions of spirit. At a crossroads, there is no such path. Only echoes, only loops. Some might argue that freedom of choice is a beautiful thing. And yes, in life, it is. But in the afterlife, especially immediately after death, the soul doesn't need infinite options. It needs direction. Too much choice without guidance can become a trap. The soul may begin replaying attachments, revisiting memories, reimagining unfinished stories. It spirals. Not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. And every time it tries to move forward, another path appears, just out of reach, just out of focus. It's like trying to run in a dream, but never reaching your destination. The unsettling part is that you won't see any of this from the outside. To the grieving family or friend, scattering ashes at a quiet country intersection might feel poetic. A place where they once walked together. A place that held significance. But on the energetic level, a web is being woven, one that the soul may struggle to escape. The road that was once nostalgic becomes a loop, a tether, a fog. What's even more complicated is that many crossroads are already saturated with residual energy. Accidents, arguments, decisions, despair. How many people have stood at that same place in crisis, in confusion, in fear? Every one of them leaves an imprint. When you scatter ashes there, you're not just placing them on land, you're placing them in a field of unresolved momentum. The soul absorbs it. It tries to make sense of what it's feeling. It thinks, perhaps, these are my emotions, these are my paths, this is my pain. But they're not. They're echoes of others. Yet the soul, untethered and open, receives it all. This creates a kind of spiritual static. The soul, already vulnerable from the disorientation of death, becomes even more clouded. Instead of hearing the call to rise, it hears everything at once, every path, every pull, every voice. It's like tuning a radio to multiple stations at once. Nothing is clear, everything overlaps. If love is clarity, then one of the greatest gifts you can give to the dead is direction. Not control, not force, but space to rise. Crossroads don't offer that. They mimic freedom, but conceal confusion. They promise movement, but offer chaos. And that's the danger. Not malice, not malevolence, just the illusion of liberation. A soul doesn't need illusion, it needs truth. And truth, especially in death, is quiet, spacious, and still. So, if you ever find yourself standing at a crossroads with ashes in your hand, pause. Ask yourself what you're truly offering. Is it closure, or is it more confusion? Does this place radiate peace, or does it simply symbolize something for you that may not serve them? Remember, the soul doesn't need symbolism. It needs sanctuary. It needs to be lifted, not looped, guided, not scattered. And maybe that's the lesson the crossroads have always tried to teach us. Not every path is meant to be taken. Some places are thresholds, not destinations. And when it comes to guiding someone you love into the next world, the last thing you want to do is leave them circling a choice they were never meant to make. What if I told you that even the most sacred-looking places can become traps for the soul? That a cemetery, despite its peaceful silence and well-trimmed lawns, can still confuse, displace, or even delay a soul's evolution, if that soul doesn't belong there? Cemeteries seem like the natural place to honor the dead. They are quiet, solemn, and culturally accepted as resting grounds. To the human eye, they look like holy ground, but to the subtle senses of a transitioning soul, they are energetic landscapes shaped by lineage, memory, and spiritual inheritance. And not every cemetery welcomes every soul. In fact, placing ashes in a burial ground where the spirit has no ancestral ties can create dissonance that ripples through the soul's next journey. You may not have thought of this before. Few people do. When someone passes, the focus is often on practicality. Where can the remains be laid to rest? Where would be respectful, convenient, serene? And many choose a cemetery not out of deep spiritual insight, but because it feels safe, traditional. But tradition, without energetic awareness, can become a blindfold. Just because a cemetery is built for the dead doesn't mean it supports every death. And just because it feels emotionally neutral doesn't mean it is spiritually neutral. Every cemetery holds its own vibrational field. It's not just about gravestones and memories, it's about energetic roots. When generations of a single family are buried together, something profound happens. A spiritual continuity forms, a network of soul memory, love, and karmic threads that bind the resting souls together in peace. In that space, new souls added to the lineage don't feel lost, they feel held. They don't need to search for belonging, it's already there. They resonate with the frequencies of ancestors who knew them, or at least knew the bloodline they came from. The ground doesn't just accept them, it recognizes them. But when ashes are scattered in a cemetery where there is no familial connection, that recognition is missing. The soul enters a field that isn't aligned with its vibrational blueprint. It's like stepping into someone else's home uninvited, not out of disrespect, but out of misplacement. The photos on the walls aren't your family, the stories whispered by the wind aren't yours. And so the spirit, instead of resting, begins to search. Who are these souls around me? What am I meant to do here? Where do I go from here? This lack of resonance can create a subtle but significant confusion. The soul may unconsciously try to attune itself to the energies already anchored in the space, and those energies might not be compatible. They might be tied to histories, lineages, or karmic wounds that the spirit has no business engaging with. But proximity has power. The soul, being open and receptive during transition, may absorb what it senses around it. And in that absorption, it can take on threads that do not belong to its own spiritual path. This is not dramatic possession or haunted imagery. This is gentle displacement, a kind of spiritual drift. The soul becomes entangled in echoes of grief that aren't its own. It may feel pulled into unresolved karmas of those buried nearby. It may mistake another lineage's vibration as its next path, And in doing so, it delays its own release, not because it is punished, but because it is confused. In some cases, this confusion can ripple outward, not just affecting the soul in transition, but the ones who laid it to rest. Families may feel unsettled without understanding why. A subtle tension may grow, as though something has not quite finished. Grief may linger longer than expected. Dreams may become strange. There is a sense of something unresolved, something not quite at peace. And often, the root of this restlessness is energetic mismatch. The soul was placed in a field that doesn't align, and both worlds are now trying to compensate. There are also deeper implications. Cemeteries are not just fields of rest, they are fields of memory. Each soul buried there contributes to a larger energetic network. That network holds the frequency of shared ancestry, spiritual DNA, if you will. Introducing a soul who does not belong can disrupt that pattern. It's not an insult, it's interference. Like adding a new instrument into an orchestra mid-performance, without knowing the key or rhythm. The result is disharmony, not because the instrument is bad, but because the placement was unprepared. This is why many ancient cultures emphasized family burial grounds. Not because they were attached to heritage in the superficial sense, but because they understood vibrational compatibility. They knew that just as bodies belong to family trees, so do souls. And when a soul returns to that energetic root, it is received, it is integrated. It is blessed with the presence of those who paved the way before it. This is not about nostalgia, it is about alignment. Without that alignment, even the most beautiful cemetery can become a place of wandering. You might wonder, what if the person had no close family? What if their lineage is lost, forgotten, or fragmented? In those cases, the answer isn't just to place them somewhere convenient. The answer is to create spiritual belonging through intention. That might mean choosing a sacred natural site where the earth itself holds clear energy. Or it might mean establishing a new energetic lineage through conscious ritual, inviting the soul to be held by the ancestors of the land, or to find harmony with kindred spirits beyond blood. The key is not biology. The key is resonance. A cemetery without lineage can still be the right place, but only if the energy is clear, welcoming, and spiritually prepared. That preparation doesn't come from paperwork. It comes from prayer, ritual, and presence. It comes from recognizing that when we place ashes somewhere, we are asking the soul to trust us, to trust that we've chosen a place that will carry them forward, not hold them back. Because make no mistake, the soul still feels, it still senses, and when it is placed among strangers with no shared memory, it must either retreat inward or begin reaching outward. If it reaches outward and finds no resonance, it becomes adrift. If it retreats inward, it may delay its next step. Either way, the journey becomes harder than it needs to be. So, before you choose a cemetery that looks quiet, ask yourself, does this place know them? Will it recognize their vibration, or will it force them to adapt to a pattern that isn't theirs? Are you placing them in a space that supports their rest, or are you placing them somewhere that simply feels acceptable to the living? There is no shame in not knowing this before, but now you do, and now you have the power to choose differently. To see ashes not as a task, but as a trust. To see burial not as closure, but as initiation. To choose a place not just for beauty or tradition, but for resonance. That choice could mean the difference between a soul resting in light or lingering in someone else's shadow. Because in the end, it's not about where the body is laid, it's about where the soul is guided. And every soul deserves to be placed not where it's tolerated, but where it's truly, energetically, home. What if I told you that keeping your loved one's ashes inside your home could be the very thing holding both of you back? It's a heartbreaking thought, especially when your grief is still fresh. Holding on to what remains, an urn on the mantel, a small shrine in the bedroom, a quiet corner where you speak to them each night, feels like an act of love. It feels comforting, a way to keep the bond alive. But sometimes, what feels like love is actually attachment disguised in ritual. And when the boundary between remembrance and clinging is blurred, the energy between the living and the departed becomes tangled in ways that neither soul intended. You keep the ashes close because you want to feel them near. You want to believe they haven't truly left. You want their presence in your life to continue, even if it's only in silence. But ashes are more than symbols. They carry energetic remnants of the person they once belonged to. They are not the person themselves, but they are deeply tied to their final earthly vibration. And when those ashes are kept in spaces of daily living, especially personal, emotionally charged spaces like bedrooms or private altars, they create an energetic bridge, a cord, a connection that continues to loop back and forth, keeping the soul partially anchored to the material world and subtly preventing it from moving on in full. It doesn't happen out of malice, it happens out of love, but love, when it clings too tightly, can become a cage. You may not see it, but the soul feels it. It senses the emotional pull, the longing, the grief that has turned into routine, and in sensing that, it stays near, not always because it wants to, but because it doesn't want to leave you hurting. It feels your sorrow and stays in proximity to soothe it. But in doing so, it delays its own journey into light. The home, especially the bedroom, is a space of intimate energy. It's where you rest, dream, process, and unconsciously release or absorb emotions. When ashes are kept in that space, they don't simply rest, they interact. They sit within the energetic field of your most vulnerable moments. The nightly thoughts you try to suppress, the grief that returns just before sleep, the silent wishes you whisper into the dark. All of that becomes part of the energetic environment the ashes absorb. And because ashes carry trace frequencies of the soul, that energy doesn't just sit, it feeds the loop between you and the departed. You may feel comforted, but underneath the comfort is a form of energetic stagnation. Grief isn't moving, it's looping. The soul isn't rising, it's hovering. And while you may believe you're creating a sacred space, you might unknowingly be creating a spiritual holding pattern for both of you. There's also something else to consider. When you keep ashes inside the home, you often unconsciously begin to treat them as if they are still the person. You speak to them, you arrange flowers, you clean around them, you build rituals. And while ritual can be sacred, when it stems from unresolved sorrow or fear of letting go, it becomes a substitute for healing. It becomes a way to preserve the illusion that nothing has changed. But something has changed. The soul has transitioned. And the longer we resist that truth, the longer we resist our own transformation. Sometimes the desire to keep ashes at home is born from guilt. Maybe you weren't there when they passed. Maybe things were left unsaid. Maybe you feel like you owe them a closeness in death that you didn't give in life. These are deeply human feelings, and they deserve compassion. But holding on to their ashes will not rewrite the past. It will only bind the present to what was, instead of allowing the soul to move forward into what it's becoming. And the most heartbreaking part? Often, the soul is waiting for your permission. It's standing at the edge of release, sensing your emotional grip, wondering if it's safe to leave, wondering if you'll be okay, wondering if your mourning will ever become peace. The soul wants to rise, but not at the cost of your collapse. So it waits, it hovers, and sometimes, it stays far longer than it needs to, out of love. But love is not always holding on. Sometimes love is letting go, completely. This doesn't mean you have to forget them. It doesn't mean you have to stop talking to them. It means you shift the relationship from physical to spiritual, from clinging to honoring, from weight to lightness. It means recognizing that their essence is no longer confined to an object, a container, or a room. It is everywhere now. In the wind, in the stars, in the quiet moments when you feel them, not because they're trapped, but because they are finally free. Keeping ashes in the home may feel safe, but it's a safety that comes at a cost. Your own healing can become delayed. Your own energetic space can become clouded. Dreams become restless. The energy of the home becomes layered with sorrow, nostalgia, and emotional static. You may find it harder to move on, not because time hasn't passed, but because, energetically, you're still holding the door open, waiting for someone who's already walked through it. So, what's the alternative? It doesn't mean you have to give up everything. But perhaps, when the time is right, you can create a new kind of ritual, one that is focused not on keeping, but on releasing. One that honors the bond while acknowledging that both of you are on separate paths now. You can choose a place that feels energetically peaceful, spiritually clear, and far enough from your everyday emotional landscape that it doesn't keep stirring the wound. Release doesn't have to be abrupt, it can be sacred, gentle, intentional. You can say goodbye in a way that finally lets the soul rise, without the weight of your sorrow holding it close. You can transform your grief into a blessing, a farewell that says, "Thank you for everything, you are free now, and so am I." And here's the beautiful truth. Once you truly release them, you might feel their presence more clearly than ever before. Not in the heavy pull of longing, but in the subtle whisper of peace. Not in the silent urn on a shelf, but in the sudden breeze that brushes your cheek on a still day. In the unexpected warmth that floods your heart when you think of them with joy instead of ache. Because when the soul is no longer tethered, it can visit freely. It can move between worlds without resistance. And that movement brings clarity, not just to them, but to you. You begin to live again. You begin to heal, not because time has numbed you, but because love has transformed you. Letting go is not betrayal. Letting go is the highest form of devotion. It is saying, "I love you enough to not keep you bound to my pain." It is choosing spiritual freedom over emotional familiarity. And when you do that, something extraordinary happens. The grief begins to lift, the air in your home feels lighter, the nights feel quieter, and you, for the first time in a long while, begin to feel alive. So ask yourself gently, are you keeping them close for them, or for you? And if it's for you, is it helping you heal, or keeping you from it? These are not easy questions, but in asking them, you begin the process of opening a door, not for the soul to re-enter, but for it to exit, fully, peacefully, and with your blessing. What if I told you that some places on earth still echo with screams no one can hear? That beneath the surface of serene landscapes or seemingly quiet ruins, there are invisible scars, energetic wounds left by immense human suffering, and that laying a loved one's ashes in such a place might invite them into someone else's pain. It's easy to overlook the energetic history of a location. We look at the present-day appearance of a place and assume it's safe, sacred, or silent. We visit former battlefields turned into parks, accident sites transformed into memorials, or areas once devastated by natural disasters, now rebuilt with new life. But while the physical world may be repaired, the spiritual residue often remains. The earth remembers. And not just in memory or monument, it remembers in vibration. When tragedy strikes a location, when lives are lost suddenly, violently, or en masse, the emotional charge of that event imprints itself into the land. It seeps into the ground like an invisible ink, staining the energetic field of that area. This is not metaphor. This is frequency. Think about what happens when you walk into a place where something terrible once occurred. Even if you don't know the history, your body reacts. You feel it, a chill, a pressure, a sadness you can't explain. That's not imagination, it's resonance. And just as the living are affected by such places, so too are the souls of the departed, only more so. In life, we filter, we rationalize, suppress, compartmentalize. But in death, those filters dissolve. The soul becomes hypersensitive. It feels everything, the environment, the thoughts of the living, the unresolved emotions surrounding its body, and when ashes are placed in locations with heavy energetic trauma, the soul absorbs it. Not intentionally, but inevitably. It's like a sponge placed in dark water. It takes in whatever is around it, and if that environment is full of unhealed grief, rage, or terror, the soul can become entangled in energies that have nothing to do with its own journey. Think about a battlefield. What happened there didn't end when the fighting stopped. The fear, confusion, pain, and desperation of thousands of souls remain imprinted in the air, the soil, and the energetic blueprint of that land. Some spirits never found peace. Their deaths were too abrupt, too brutal, and their lingering presence creates a kind of spiritual gravity. Now imagine scattering a loved one's ashes there. What you intend as a noble act, perhaps honoring a soldier's life, or connecting them to history, may instead anchor their soul into a field of unresolved suffering. Instead of rising into light, the soul begins to echo with vibrations of trauma that do not belong to them. It becomes confused, weighed down, not by its own unfinished business, but by the unfinished business of the land itself. Accident sites are no different. A highway where dozens have lost their lives. A building where tragedy struck without warning, a location marked by sudden death, leaves behind an energetic fingerprint that lingers long after the wreckage is cleared. The emotion at these sites is not gentle. It is jarring, disorienting, and often chaotic. When a soul transitions peacefully, it naturally begins to ascend. But when ashes are placed in spaces of past chaos, that soul is exposed to frequencies that mirror fear, confusion, or pain. And the danger is that the soul may begin to identify with it, mistaking it as its own. There's also something to be said about collective grief. Disaster zones, tsunamis, earthquakes, fires, carry not just individual trauma but the compounded sorrow of entire communities. In these places, the land holds the memory of desperation, displacement, and loss on a massive scale. While it's natural to want to return someone to a place they loved before a tragedy occurred, it's important to ask, has that land been spiritually cleared? Has the energy shifted? Or are you laying a delicate, transitioning soul into a current that still churns with unresolved sorrow? Because if the answer is no, you might be planting a seed in poisoned soil, not visibly, not in a way the eye can see. But energetically, the soul may start to absorb vibrations that are incompatible with peace. It may feel surrounded by grief that has no context, pain that has no name. And in trying to process it, the soul may become stuck, not because of its own life, but because of what was left behind by others. This isn't about fear, it's about discernment. Not all land is the same. Some places are inherently sacred, others have become sacred through healing. But places of trauma remain spiritually wounded until conscious clearing has been done, ritual, prayer, ceremony. Without it, the energy stays trapped, like echoes in a locked room. And when you introduce a soul into that space, especially a soul that has just separated from its body, it's like placing a newborn into a thunderstorm. They don't know where to go, they feel everything, and they become overwhelmed. You might be thinking, but what if the person had a connection to that place? What if they died there? Doesn't it make sense to return them to where their life ended? Sometimes, yes. But only if the energy of that space has been cleared, honored, and elevated. Otherwise, you're not returning them, you're reattaching them. You're anchoring them in the very frequency they were meant to transcend. Death is not about returning to the point of exit, it's about continuing forward into the next vibration. The intention behind scattering ashes is usually love. But intention alone isn't enough. The environment matters, the energy matters. And if your love isn't paired with awareness, you might be placing someone you care about into a spiritual fog that was never meant for them. It's like releasing a bird into a storm. Even if you mean well, the winds can carry them off course. The soul, in its journey, is seeking clarity. It wants to let go of what was and embrace what is next. But when you place ashes in a location saturated with unresolved pain, the soul may feel like it needs to stay and help, heal the space, comfort the echoes, be present for the energies that linger. But that's not its job anymore. Its path is upward, not outward, and when it becomes distracted by the grief of others, its own healing is delayed. So before you choose a location that once held historical or personal weight, ask yourself, what energy still resides here? Is this place peaceful, or is it just quiet? Has the land healed, or has it simply been covered with grass and stone? Has the trauma been honored, cleared, and released? Or is it still vibrating beneath the surface, waiting to be witnessed? The earth remembers, and the soul feels what the earth remembers. Your responsibility is not just to memorialize, it is to spiritualize. To ensure that wherever you place what remains, you're placing it in soil that lifts, not soil that cries. In air that clears, not air that repeats. You're not simply choosing a location, you're choosing the frequency that will surround the soul as it completes its transition. And sometimes, the most powerful act of love is choosing not the most meaningful place, but the most peaceful one. Not the site of a memory, but the space of true energetic calm. Because in the end, ashes are not meant to rest in suffering, they are meant to rise from it. What if I told you that water doesn't just carry the ashes, it carries the soul's vibration, that every river, lake, or ocean has a memory, and that when we scatter ashes into these living bodies without sacred intention, we may not be offering peace, we may be stirring confusion. There is something undeniably poetic about returning ashes to water. It feels symbolic, flowing, gentle, even cleansing. For many, it seems like the perfect farewell, a moment of release, as the remains drift into the current, dissolving into the vastness. But while the gesture may appear beautiful on the surface, the spiritual implications run far deeper. Water is not just a medium, it's a transmitter. It amplifies what it receives, and without conscious care, what it amplifies might not be peace, but energetic chaos. Water is alive, not metaphorically, but energetically. It holds memory, it responds to emotion. Scientific studies have shown that water molecules restructure themselves in response to words, thoughts, and feelings. And if water responds this way to the intentions of the living, imagine how it responds to the subtle, delicate energies of the newly departed. When you scatter ashes into water, you're not just returning them to nature. You're introducing a vibrational imprint into a flowing, responsive field. That field will either carry the soul gently forward, or pull it into emotional undertow. The issue is not with the water itself, but with the absence of ceremony. Sacred intention is what transforms scattering into release. Without it, the act becomes hollow, rushed, sometimes even careless. Ashes tossed into a lake during a weekend trip. Remains sprinkled into the sea while distracted by conversation. No prayer, no pause, no recognition of the spiritual weight behind the gesture. When this happens, the water absorbs the ashes, but not the meaning. It receives the vibration of grief, confusion, or even emotional detachment, and that is what it amplifies. The soul, still sensitive and attuned, feels that discord and becomes unmoored, not free, but directionless. You might think that water is a neutral element, and in many ways, it is. But neutrality is not the same as sanctity. Without reverence, neutrality becomes emptiness. And emptiness, for a transitioning soul, offers no guidance. Sacred water, on the other hand, blessed, spoken to, honored, becomes a portal. It becomes a bridge. It knows what to do. But when water is treated as convenience rather than communion, it cannot fulfill its highest role. Instead of elevating the soul, it disperses its energy without direction. There's a vast difference between sacred cleansing and spiritual scattering. Cleansing, when done with presence and prayer, helps the soul shed its earthly attachments. It dissolves the cords of identity with gentleness, allowing the spirit to rise lighter and more whole. But scattering without that spiritual attention fragments the soul's final vibration. It's like shredding a document before understanding what it contained. The pieces scatter into the current, and the soul is left trying to recollect itself, its meaning, its identity, its path. It is not the movement of the water that causes harm. It is the absence of stillness in the heart. It is the lack of awareness in the mind of the living. When a soul's remains are handed over to water without preparation, without invocation, without silence, the soul receives the message, "You are no longer my responsibility." That may not be what was intended, but energy reads intention, not appearances. The sea is vast. Lakes are deep. Rivers never stop moving. These are not resting places, they are transitional forces. To place ashes in them is to say, go, move on, dissolve. But if the soul has not yet integrated its passing, if the ceremony does not provide closure or clarity, it will not dissolve peacefully. It will linger within the current, drawn into the frequencies of everything else the water carries. Other deaths, other emotions, the energy of pollution, of noise, of collective unconsciousness. Water absorbs all of it, and your loved one's final vibrational imprint can become just another ripple in the overwhelming tide of unprocessed emotion. This is why ancient traditions treated water ceremonies with the utmost respect. They chose the location carefully. They timed the ritual with natural rhythms, the moon, the tide, the sunrise. They offered words, gifts, prayers. They didn't just scatter, they sanctified, because they understood that water, when treated as sacred, becomes an ally. It helps guide the soul, rather than simply absorb it. And guidance, in the moments after death, is everything. If water holds memory, then it also holds story. When you release ashes into it, what story are you adding? Is it one of peace, release, honoring, or is it one of distraction, haste, or obligation? The water will reflect back whatever you give it. And the soul, still attuned to the frequencies of this world, will receive that reflection as part of its own story. Sometimes, people choose water because they don't know what else to do. They want to avoid the harshness of burial, the sterility of an urn. They want something beautiful. But beauty without energy is just surface. What matters is the consciousness behind the act. A simple, quiet release with sincere intention is far more powerful than a grand scattering done without spiritual awareness. If you feel drawn to water, that's not wrong, but bring presence into the process. Speak to the water, bless it, ask it to receive not just the ashes, but the soul. Ask it to carry what remains gently, with reverence, into the next vibration. Speak to your loved one aloud. Let them know that this is a release, not a disowning, that they are free to rise, not bound to flow forever, that they are more than these ashes, and that your love does not keep them, it lifts them. And if water has already received the ashes without ceremony, it's not too late. You can still offer the blessing now. You can still create the sacred container through intention. Energy is not bound by time. Speak from your heart. Honor the place. Reclaim the reverence. The soul will feel it. Because water, more than any element, teaches us one truth: everything moves. Nothing is still forever. But movement without meaning is drift. And drift, for a soul in transition, can become delay. The goal is not just to let go, it's to let go well, with purpose, with presence, with peace. So the next time you look at a river, a lake, or the sea, remember this: they are not empty vessels. They are ancient beings. And when you place something sacred in their care, they respond best when they are met with equal sacredness. Not ceremony for the sake of appearance, but energy offered in truth. When you do this, the water doesn't just receive, it blesses. It carries the soul into realms your eyes cannot see. And the soul, now honored, now free, becomes not a ripple of confusion, but a current of light. What if I told you that not every high place lifts the soul? That not every mountain top is a gateway to the heavens? In fact, some of the most elevated places on earth, those breathtaking cliffs, those majestic summits people climb for spiritual release, may actually be some of the most energetically unstable grounds you could ever scatter ashes upon. It's a seductive idea, isn't it? The higher the location, the closer to the divine, the closer to the sky, the more symbolic the release. From a distance, the peaks call to us. They feel sacred, isolated, powerful. People often believe that scattering ashes at a mountain's summit will help the soul rise, that the thin air and panoramic views must surely equate to spiritual elevation. But elevation is not ascension, and height, without harmony, can become distortion. Many mountaintops are not peaceful. They are wild, wind-whipped, turbulent. The energy there doesn't always move upward. It spirals, it fractures, it ricochets. Just as the air is thin, the energy is stretched. And in some places, it becomes chaotic. The forces that shape a mountain, the tectonic clashes, the violent weather, the ancient upheavals, leave behind more than just geological formations. They leave a spiritual footprint. And if that footprint isn't aligned, if it hasn't been honored, blessed, or energetically cleansed, it can disorient the soul rather than elevate it. Height creates drama, and drama, for the soul, is rarely conducive to peace. You may think you're offering your loved one a powerful departure, but if the location is charged with unresolved energetic conflict, that soul may feel overwhelmed instead of lifted. It's not the view that matters. It's the vibration. Some mountaintops are sacred, not because they're high, but because they've been used as portals for centuries, sacred rituals, pilgrimages, offerings. These places carry a stillness, a quiet invitation to rise. But others, despite their beauty, carry agitation, restlessness, echoes of climbers lost, accidents, the harshness of nature's indifference. The energy in these places is not soothing, it's scattered. When ashes are placed in such a location, the soul may encounter instability in its energetic field. Instead of rising smoothly, it encounters interference. It begins to resonate, not with peace, but with fragmentation. It senses motion, but not direction. This can cause the soul to become ungrounded, not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual. It feels displaced, not because it isn't welcomed, but because it wasn't aligned. The land didn't recognize it, and that matters. Scattering ashes on a cliff or summit is often done with deep emotion. There's the sense of epic farewell, a cinematic goodbye. But emotion alone doesn't sanctify a place. What sanctifies it is harmony between the soul, the land, and the intention. Without that threefold alignment, the ritual can become more about performance than peace. The soul is not moved by spectacle. It doesn't need altitude, it needs resonance. A low valley full of stillness and love can elevate the soul far more than a dramatic peak filled with turbulent wind and leftover fear. There's also the issue of elemental force. Mountain tops are governed by extremes, violent weather changes, icy air, jagged energy lines. These aren't inherently bad, but they are intense. And intensity, for a soul in transition, can feel like pressure. It can push the soul into defense, into fragmentation, into retreat. A cliff may offer a breathtaking view, but that doesn't mean it's the right place for departure. It might be beautiful to the eyes, but jarring to the spirit. When you're choosing a resting place, it's easy to be drawn toward symbols. Height equals freedom. Distance equals transcendence. But these are human projections. The soul doesn't need drama to rise. It doesn't need theatrics to feel honored. It needs intention, stillness, love, and it needs to be placed in a space that recognizes its vibration and welcomes it in return. There are certain mountains that are truly sacred, recognized across generations as places of pilgrimage, healing, and divine contact. These mountains are not just high, they are aligned. They have been prepared, year after year, by rituals that cleanse, bless, and recalibrate the land. Their vibration is coherent, their air is thin, yes, but their energy is thick with presence. If you're drawn to place ashes at such a location, it may be suitable, provided the act is approached with reverence, humility, and care. But placing ashes on just any mountain, simply because it's dramatic or isolated, is another story. Isolation doesn't guarantee clarity. Some high places are energetically chaotic because they've never been cleared. Others are simply not meant to carry spiritual transition. They may be meant for challenge, for vision quests, for personal tests. But death is not a test. It is a passage, and that passage deserves a space that holds stillness, not stress. Also consider what happens after the ashes are scattered. On a mountain, the wind rarely moves in one direction. The ashes may not rest. They may be blown far away, in every direction. That scattering may seem freeing, but energetically, it can signal fragmentation. The soul's final, earthly vessel is divided, particles taken by unpredictable winds. There is no center, no holding, no containment of blessing. It becomes difficult for the soul to anchor its final earthly moment in peace. This isn't superstition, it's energy. When a body is cremated, the ashes that remain carry a vibrational signature. That signature is delicate, like the final chord of a song. You don't want that chord to be interrupted by static. You want it to complete, to resolve, to echo upward into spirit, not downward into confusion. And the environment in which the ashes are placed plays a huge role in whether that completion is smooth or scattered. So before you stand on a cliff, holding that urn, with tears in your eyes, and the wind rushing at your back, pause. Ask yourself, is this place truly calm, or just quiet? Is it aligned with the soul's energy, or simply dramatic in appearance? Are you choosing this because the land is calling, or because the view stirs your emotions? There's nothing wrong with wanting beauty, but beauty should be in service of the soul's release, not the living's need for closure. The most powerful ceremonies are not always the most dramatic. They are the most attuned. They are led by the land itself, by the feeling of harmony in the space, by the subtle confirmation that this is the right place. Not because it's high, but because it's whole. If you truly want to place ashes on a mountain, treat the land as a living participant. Speak to it, ask permission, listen, bless the ashes, ground your energy, make the space sacred, not with grand gestures, but with sincere presence. And if the mountain answers back with stillness, with warmth, with spiritual recognition, then and only then is it a suitable place of release. Because the goal is not to throw the soul into the sky. The goal is to lift it, gently, into its next vibration, with love, with clarity, and with the kind of peace that doesn't need height to be holy. What if I told you that the place where you shared your happiest memories with someone might be the very last place you should scatter their ashes? That amusement parks, sports stadiums, beach resorts, and iconic tourist landmarks, those places that feel magical in life, can become vibrational traps in death? It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? You loved going there together. It's where you laughed, where you connected, where you felt free from the weight of the world. So when they passed, you thought, what better place to let them go? A place filled with good memories, a place that meant something. But memories belong to you, energy belongs to the earth. And not every place that felt joyful to the living creates peace for the soul. Tourist destinations are chaotic by nature. On the surface, they seem festive, uplifting, even sacred in their own modern way. But underneath the noise, the flashing lights, the thousands of distracted footsteps, the energy is fragmented. These places are designed for constant stimulation. They thrive on movement, noise, novelty, and transaction. The energy field they produce is not stable, it is scattered. In such environments, the soul finds no stillness, no grounding, no resonance with the quiet journey it has just begun. The soul in transition is hypersensitive. It's not looking for fun, it's looking for direction. It's not trying to be entertained, it's trying to release its last threads of identity and move forward. And when its final physical remnants are placed in locations dominated by distraction, performance, or consumption, the soul can easily become confused. It doesn't recognize the noise as celebration, it experiences it as distortion. Take an amusement park, for example. It may have been your loved one's favorite place. You remember their laughter on the roller coasters, their joy at the fireworks, the shared nostalgia that made it feel like home. But now, imagine placing their ashes beneath a tree in the middle of that park. Every day, hundreds, maybe thousands, of people walk by, not in reverence, but in thrill-seeking. The emotional field of that place is not one of reflection. It's a whirlwind of anticipation, anxiety, overstimulation, and surface-level joy. There is no spiritual holding space. There is no invitation to rise. Just a never-ending wave of sensation without stillness. The soul, attuned to vibration, absorbs the energy of its resting place. If that energy is shallow or erratic, the soul may feel unmoored. It may not fully understand that it has left the body. It may interpret the constant noise and movement as a call to return, to participate, to reattach. And in doing so, it delays its own transition. It becomes tethered, not by your love, but by the vibrational chaos of its surroundings. The same applies to stadiums and entertainment venues. These are places of powerful energy, but that energy is focused on spectacle, on winning, on rivalry, on the collective surge of crowd emotion that has little to do with stillness or sacredness. These frequencies are intense, but not harmonious. They're human, yes, but they're rooted in ego, identity, and external stimulation. When ashes are left in such a place, the soul is not elevated by the crowd's roar, it is drowned in it. It loses its internal compass amidst the vibrations of noise and novelty. Then there are vacation spots, beaches, ski lodges, resorts, even tropical islands. Places filled with beauty, yes, but often overlaid with transience. People come and go. Emotions flare and fade. The land itself may be sacred, but the use of it becomes transactional. These places are often not honored, they're consumed. Their energetic field becomes thin, stretched by the desires and emotional baggage of tourists who never stay long enough to bless the land. When ashes are scattered in such locations, the soul receives the message: you are part of the distraction now. You are part of this unrooted flow of sensation. And without spiritual intention to counteract that, the soul may float, directionless, in a sea of other people's projections. The core issue is this: choosing a final resting place based on memory, rather than energetic truth. Yes, it's tempting to think, they loved this place, so I'll leave them here. But did the place love them back? Was there sacred reciprocity? Was the land held in reverence, or simply used for pleasure? The soul isn't trying to relive its best days. it's trying to move on. And anchoring it in a space that pulls toward nostalgia, stimulation, or entertainment may hold it in a loop of earthly identity, when what it needs is to let go of identity altogether. Memory-based decisions, though deeply emotional, are often more about the mourner than the soul. You want to feel close to them. You want to honor what they loved. But what they loved in life is not necessarily what will support them in death. This transition is no longer about holding on to the past. It's about creating conditions for ascension, and ascension requires stillness. It requires clarity. It requires a field of energy that says, you are free to rise now, nothing is pulling you back. If you absolutely must choose a location that held personal significance for your loved one, like a vacation spot or cherished venue, then you must transform it energetically before the ashes are released. That means treating it not as an amusement, but as a temple, creating space, setting intention, offering prayer. You must override the dominant frequency of distraction with the frequency of devotion. You must carve out sacredness within the chaos. Only then can the act become a true release, rather than a misplaced ritual. But the better path? Choose the place that feels right, not just the one that looks right. Go where the land is still, where the wind speaks in whispers, not siren, where the energy is coherent, gentle, and welcoming. You will know it, not because it triggers a memory, but because it quiets your mind, because it makes you feel peace, not excitement. Because your breath slows, and your heart softens, and something inside you says, this is the place. In this world, we're taught to associate love with attachment, with repetition, with recreation of the past. But real love, spiritual love, knows when to release. It knows when to shift from honoring the life that was, to supporting the journey that continues. And that shift requires courage. It means letting go of the places that made you feel good, and choosing the place that will make them feel free. The most sacred act you can offer is not a return to a memory, but a gift of clarity, of stillness, of freedom. That is the path of true reverence. That is the path of love without attachment. So if you're standing on the edge of a theme park, or a favorite vacation beach, or a sports arena, holding that urn in your hands, pause, breathe. Ask not, did they love this place? But instead, will this place love them now? If the answer is no, if the energy is fragmented, loud, or distracted, then love them enough to let that memory stay a memory, and find a new place, one that will hold their spirit, not just their story. What if I told you that the wrong place doesn't just hold ashes, it holds the soul itself? That every location on earth has an invisible language, a field of vibration that either harmonizes with the soul's next step, or pulls it backward into confusion, delay, or fragmentation. It's easy to assume that what matters most is the emotion behind the act, the intention to honor, to remember, to do right by someone we love. But when it comes to laying a soul to rest, intention is only part of the equation. The other part is resonance. And without that resonance, even the most heartfelt goodbye can leave a soul lost in the fog of unprocessed energy. Not every place on this earth is spiritually equal. Some locations hum with light, clarity, and receptivity. Others buzz with the noise of trauma, distraction, or disconnection. These vibrations are not symbolic, they're actual fields of energy. Just like your body responds to environments without consciously realizing why, the soul, especially in its freshly disembodied state, responds even more sensitively. It's not just visiting a place, it becomes entwined with it. It merges with its tone, its memory, its frequency. And if that frequency is misaligned, chaotic, stagnant, or fragmented, the soul's journey becomes altered. To understand this, you have to see the soul not as an abstract concept, but as a living, energetic consciousness. It is not confined to what remains in the urn, but it is still loosely tethered to its physical identity for a short while after death. That tether is fragile. It seeks direction. It listens for cues. It's looking for a path toward reintegration with the greater spiritual realm. And that path must be clear. When you place ashes in a location with a distorted energetic field, that clarity is interrupted. The soul hears conflicting signals. It may begin to mirror the noise around it, picking up on unresolved emotions, stagnant patterns, or foreign imprints that don't belong to its own evolution. This is what makes certain places spiritually harmful, not because they are cursed, but because they are chaotic. The danger is in the fragmentation. When a soul is scattered across a vibrational landscape that lacks coherence, it doesn't dissolve peacefully, it disorients. Imagine trying to fall asleep in a room full of flashing lights, loud arguments, and conflicting music. You would feel exhausted, overstimulated, unable to fully surrender. That's what happens to a soul placed in an energetically disruptive location. The body may be gone, but the soul still senses everything. In these moments, what was meant to be a release becomes a lingering. The soul may loop in and out of awareness, unsure if it has left or is still meant to linger. It may become fixated on old identities, unresolved relationships, or unfinished business, not because it's holding on, but because the environment keeps those patterns vibrating around it like echoes. That's how the soul gets caught, not by its own choice, but by its surroundings. And the consequences ripple outward. The living often sense when something isn't right, even if they can't explain it. They feel unrest. They dream of the departed more frequently, and not in peaceful ways. The energy of the home shifts. Subtle tensions linger. Sometimes, they return to the scattering site and feel emotionally heavy or spiritually disoriented. What was meant to bring closure ends up opening something else, something that doesn't close so easily. This is especially true when ashes are placed in high-traffic emotional zones, places with layers of unresolved human activity, tourist attractions, sites of collective trauma, overbuilt cities. Emotionally reactive environments carry fragmented spiritual data. The soul steps into these spaces and feels all of it at once. Not in the way we feel it as humans, filtered through logic and distraction, but in the raw, unbuffered way only a transitioning soul can. And because the soul still holds a vibrational imprint of its last incarnation, it begins to absorb what surrounds it, like a tuning fork resonating with the wrong pitch. You may wonder how such disruption actually affects the soul's next journey. Think of the afterlife not as a sudden leap, but as a passage, a bridge between what was and what will be. That bridge must be crossed with a lightness of being, a detachment from earthly resonance. But when the ashes are laid in the wrong place, the soul doesn't move smoothly across the bridge. It hesitates. It circles. It turns back. In some cases, it even attempts to re-anchor into the lives of those left behind, becoming a quiet presence that never truly lets go. This doesn't mean the soul is punished. It means it's caught, not by guilt, but by noise. And that noise can include the emotional attachments of the living. Sometimes, the soul is ready to go, but the ones who remain are not ready to release. Their grief, their fear of forgetting, their clinging to memory creates a dense energetic thread. When this is combined with a location that amplifies confusion or distraction, the result is spiritual limbo. So what makes a location wrong isn't about geography, it's about vibration. It's about whether the space holds coherence, sacredness, and alignment, whether it supports stillness over stimulation, whether it honors presence over performance. A mountain can be wrong, and a small forest clearing can be right. A sacred river, if approached with reverence, can guide the soul upward. But the same river, approached carelessly, can scatter the soul's imprint into chaotic waters. Aligned spiritual traditions across cultures have always known this. Indigenous peoples, mystics, monks, they have long emphasized the importance of location, ritual, and energetic preparation in death rites. They chose burial sites not for beauty, but for energetic clarity. They performed cleansing ceremonies not for tradition's sake, but to purify the field of transition. They understood that the soul is not a passive thing, it is a traveler, and every traveler needs a map, a path, a guide. When that path is surrounded by energetic fog, the traveler may never truly arrive. The tragedy is that in the modern world we've lost our sensitivity to this. We reduce sacred acts to symbols, we choose with emotion but not awareness. We forget that the earth, too, has a voice in this process. That every place we lay the dead carries a responsibility. That ashes are not just physical remains, they are energetic echoes. And those echoes must be honored with clarity, with stillness, and with sacred design. So when you ask yourself whether a place is right or wrong, don't answer with logic, don't answer with memory. Tune into the energy, walk the land, listen with your body, feel with your spirit. Does the space feel coherent? Does your breath slow there? Does your mind become still? Or do you feel unsettled, rushed, emotionally pulled in a dozen directions? That is your answer. The land is always speaking. You just have to ask the right way. The right place will not always look extraordinary. It might be quiet, hidden, forgotten by the world. But you will feel it in your chest. You will feel the presence of peace. And when you release the ashes there, you will know, not because the moment looks beautiful, but because something inside you will become still. That stillness is not yours alone. It belongs to the soul as well. And in that stillness, the soul can rise, not bound by confusion, not distracted by noise, but carried by the sacred clarity of a place that knows exactly what to do with what you've given it. What if I told you that even after death, the law of attraction still applies? That the soul doesn't simply vanish into the unknown but continues to respond, instinctively, magnetically, to the vibrations around it? You've probably heard that like attracts like. That your thoughts shape your reality. That the frequency you emit determines the people, events, and outcomes that find you. But what most people never realize is that this law doesn't stop working once the body stops breathing. The law of vibrational alignment is not tied to life, it is tied to consciousness. And consciousness does not die. When someone passes on, their soul doesn't suddenly become omniscient. It doesn't lose all memory of what it just left behind. There's a process, a transitional stage, where the soul is still adjusting, still shedding the density of its former identity. It's releasing the emotional, mental, and energetic imprints of a lifetime. In this state, the soul is incredibly sensitive. It is still responding to energy, to frequency, to the vibrations of place, intention, and emotion. It is still aligning with whatever it's surrounded by. Think of the soul as a tuning fork. After death, that tuning fork is still vibrating with the frequencies of its previous life. Grief, love, confusion, peace, longing, freedom, they're all still present. The soul begins seeking resonance. It moves toward what feels familiar or what feels coherent. If the environment around its final resting place is clear, calm, and sacred, the soul begins to align with that clarity. It naturally starts to rise. But if the environment is cluttered with emotional static, energetic distortion, or spiritual confusion, the soul becomes attracted to those frequencies instead. It starts to match them, not because it wants to, but because that's how vibrational law works. The law of attraction is not personal, it's automatic. The soul doesn't choose with logic, it responds to resonance. Whatever surrounds it becomes the mirror it steps into. That's why the place where ashes are scattered matters so deeply. The soil, the air, the emotional charge of the location, all of it speaks to the soul in a language of vibration. If that language is harmonious, the soul hears peace. If it's chaotic, the soul hears conflict. And based on what it hears, it either begins to move on, or begins to linger. You've seen this in life. When you're surrounded by confusion, it's hard to make a clear decision. When you're in an environment that constantly pulls at your emotions, it's hard to find your center. Now imagine that amplified tenfold, because the soul no longer has the buffers of the body or the mind to protect it. Everything is felt, everything is absorbed. It's not choosing where to go, it's being pulled toward whatever matches its internal vibration. And that's where things become crucial. Because even the most peaceful soul can become disoriented if placed in a field that lacks vibrational integrity. This is where the importance of intention meets the importance of environment. Intention is the seed, environment is the soil. You can have the purest, most loving intention, but if you scatter ashes in a place that is energetically noisy, traumatized, or spiritually stagnant, the seed may never root in clarity. The environment will shape the outcome. Likewise, a beautiful environment without conscious intention can also create confusion. Imagine scattering ashes in a gorgeous place, mountains, ocean, forest, but doing so without awareness. No blessing, no acknowledgement, no guidance. The soul senses the beauty, yes, but it doesn't sense direction, because the vibration is incomplete. This is why intention and environment must work together. One without the other is like having a compass with no map, or a map with no compass. Intention sets the tone for the soul's release. Environment either supports that tone or distorts it. Together, they create a field of vibrational coherence, a kind of energetic tunnel the soul can follow into the next dimension. So what does that actually look like in practice? It begins with awareness. Before choosing a location, you feel into it. Not with your memories, but with your spirit. You ask, does this place feel calm, open, and receptive, or does it feel distracted, unsettled, or closed? Then you bring your intention into that space with full presence. You speak to the soul, you speak to the land, you acknowledge what you're doing, not just for yourself, but for the spirit you're releasing. You align yourself emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You become the bridge. The soul, sensing your coherence, begins to mirror it. It feels the clarity. It feels the love, not as a chain, but as a lift. It begins to respond not just to the words you say, but to the energetic blueprint you're offering. And in that moment, the law of vibrational alignment is fulfilled. The soul is met by the frequency it needs, not just the frequency you feel. This is how you help the dead rise, not through ritual alone, but through resonance. You don't need elaborate ceremonies. You need truth, stillness, alignment. You need to understand that the unseen world is not some mystical abyss. It is a field of vibration, waiting for direction. And you are part of that direction. When people talk about hauntings, spiritual unrest, or feeling a presence that never left, it's not because the soul is malicious, it's because the soul is confused. It's still orbiting the field of its final impression. And if that field was built on emotional attachment, environmental chaos, or vibrational mismatch, the soul may remain caught there, unintentionally. It's not trapped in some punishment, it's magnetized by unresolved resonance. You may wonder, is this permanent? Is it ever too late to shift that energy? The answer is no. Energy can always be recalibrated. If ashes were scattered in a place that now feels wrong, if there was no awareness at the time, you can still intervene through intention. You can still send clarity. You can return to the location, physically or spiritually, and offer new frequency. Speak, bless, invite the soul to rise. Shift your emotional energy from holding to releasing, and the soul will feel it. Because energy is not bound by space, it moves through consciousness, through love, through clarity. The law of vibrational alignment teaches us that nothing in the universe moves randomly. Everything is drawn into place through resonance. This is true in life, and it's true beyond life. The final act of scattering ashes is not just symbolic, it's directional. It's a declaration of frequency. You are saying to the soul, this is where you begin your next step. This is the vibration you will rise from. So ask yourself, what are you offering? A field of peace, or a field of noise? A space of release, or a space of longing? You cannot fake vibration. You must feel it. You must align your grief with your wisdom, your love with your letting go. Only then can you create a space where the soul doesn't just leave, but ascends. And that, ultimately, is the most powerful act of love you can offer. Not to hold on, not to recreate the past, but to tune yourself to the frequency of their freedom and offer it without hesitation. Because in doing so, you don't just free them, you free yourself. You align with the truth that love never dies, and that letting go is not abandonment, it's liberation. For them, for you, for all that comes next. What if I told you that many final resting places aren't chosen for the dead, but for the living? That sometimes, without realizing it, we make decisions not from clarity, but from grief that hasn't yet found a place to land. The truth is, death opens up something far more complex than silence. It opens a mirror that reflects everything we've avoided feeling, everything we're still trying to control, and everything we don't want to let go of. And in the middle of that storm, we find ourselves holding ashes, unsure if we're honoring their soul, or trying to comfort our own. Grief is not wrong, it's sacred. It means you love deeply, and that love has no clear place to go now. But grief, when unexamined, has a way of wrapping itself around our decisions, especially when we're faced with the pressure of doing what feels right. In moments like this, many people think they are choosing from love, when in reality, they are choosing from fear. Fear of letting go, fear of forgetting, fear of what their life will look like when that person is no longer tethered to a physical object, a place, a reminder. And so, the decision of where to scatter the ashes becomes less about what's best for the soul, and more about what allows the living to stay connected. This is not a judgment. It's a call for compassion, for yourself, and for the one you've lost. Because grief tends to project. It can project the belief that the soul wants to be close to us, that it wants to stay in the places we shared, that it would feel lonely if we placed it too far away. But the truth is, the soul is not bound by memory. It is not concerned with monuments. It doesn't need to be kept close. That need is ours. That need is a part of the wound that hasn't yet healed. The dilemma is this. When we scatter ashes from a place of emotional pain, we may unconsciously trap the energy of the soul in the field of our suffering. We may hold it too tightly, confuse attachment with honor, or treat their remains as if they are the person, rather than the echo. And in doing so, we keep them close physically, while energetically holding them back from their next step. We don't mean to. It's not a lack of love, it's the depth of it. But true love, when matured, releases. It doesn't bind. It doesn't project human longing onto a spirit that's ready to rise. Think about it. Are we choosing locations that genuinely support their soul's clarity, or are we choosing places that make us feel less alone? Are we creating rituals that open portals of peace, or are we recreating a moment in time we wish had never ended? It's difficult to tell the difference when you're in pain. That's why awareness is so essential. Because every ritual is an energetic message. It tells the soul, here is where your journey continues, or it tells the soul, here is where I still need you to stay. Sometimes, the desire to keep ashes in the home, in a locket, or in a secret place in the garden, isn't about honoring, it's about preserving. We want something tangible, something we can hold when the absence becomes too loud. But ashes are not a replacement for presence, they are a symbol, and the more we cling to the symbol, the more we risk missing the transformation that's trying to take place, both in the soul that left, and in the soul that remains. Grief is not something you fix, it's something you move through. And part of moving through it means allowing space for new understanding. It means realizing that what you're really being invited to do is grow in your spiritual capacity to let go with grace, to honor the soul not by holding on, but by creating the right conditions for its elevation, and in doing so, you also elevate yourself. But this doesn't mean you have to rush, or that you must feel ready before you make a decision. What it means is that you pause, you breathe, you ask yourself honestly, is this choice coming from my clarity or my pain? Am I placing them somewhere that supports their release, or somewhere that softens my sadness? Am I making this about their journey, or about my need to feel closer? There's no shame in needing comfort. There's no shame in crying over a piece of jewelry that holds a pinch of ashes, or wanting to visit a place that reminds you of them. But clarity comes when you recognize that those actions are for you, that they serve your healing, not necessarily their path. And when you can name that, when you can see it clearly, you free yourself from the illusion that you're doing it for them. You start walking a new path, one where your grief becomes a teacher, not a trap. The most powerful rituals, the most loving final decisions, are the ones made from presence. Not from reactivity, not from fear of forgetting, but from a deep inner stillness that says, I know who you were, I honor who you are, and I trust who you're becoming. And because of that, I choose a place that feels sacred, not because it holds my past, but because it supports your future. That is what love looks like when it has grown beyond the need to hold. That is what release looks like when it is led by truth. So ask yourself again, who am I really doing this for? If the answer is, for them, then let your actions reflect that. Let the location you choose be in harmony with their soul's next step. Let your intention be clean, quiet, grounded. Let your grief bow to their becoming. But if the honest answer is, for me, that's okay too. Let that be your moment of healing. Let it be the start of your own transformation. Because in recognizing your needs with honesty, you stop projecting them onto the soul, and that alone creates space for both of you to rise. Death does not sever the bond of love, it transforms it, and part of that transformation is learning to love without needing to possess. To remember, without needing to reattach. To mourn without turning the ashes into a shrine of suffering. Your memories are enough. Your heart is enough. And the most sacred thing you can do is to offer the soul a resting place that says, I trust you to rise now. You don't need to carry my pain. You don't need to stay behind and watch over me. You are free, and so am I. This is the shift, from grief to clarity, from holding on to letting through, from choosing what brings comfort to choosing what brings peace. Not just for the departed, but for the one who still walks the earth. Learning to live again with a heart that now knows how to let go. What if I told you that the place you choose to scatter ashes could serve as a bridge between worlds? That with the right setting, the right energy, and the right intention, you don't just let go, you guide a soul home? Too often, this decision is reduced to something sentimental or symbolic. But if you've come this far, you already know. There's more to it than memory. The ashes don't just represent what was. They carry the energetic remnants of a soul that is still transitioning, still moving, still listening. And where you return them to the earth matters. It matters deeply. Not every place is created equal in vibration. Some places weigh you down, others lift you up. Some are saturated with noise, others speak only in whispers, as if they're holding something sacred beneath the surface. And when you stand in those rare spaces, the ones that hum with stillness, the ones that wrap around you with silence instead of sound, you feel it. You feel clarity. You feel peace. That's how you know you've found a place that helps a soul rise. So, where should you scatter ashes? Start by letting go of the idea that it needs to be dramatic, or photogenic, or even familiar. This is not about what looks beautiful to the eye. It's about what feels clear to the spirit. The best locations are those that have not been overly imprinted by human chaos. Spaces where the natural rhythm of the earth is still intact. These are the places where the veil is thinner, where energy moves unimpeded, where the land itself holds wisdom. One of the most powerful options is sacred land, places that have been used for ceremony, prayer, or spiritual reverence for generations. This might be a known pilgrimage site, a remote monastery, or simply a patch of earth that has been honored by those who walked it with humility. Sacred land holds a vibration that's already tuned to ascension. It doesn't weigh the soul down, it elevates. It doesn't confuse, it guides. When ashes are returned to such a place, the soul feels it immediately. It's like stepping into a current that carries you gently but firmly toward the next realm. If access to such locations isn't possible, seek out natural spaces untouched by noise. Forests where the trees are tall and time feels still. Open fields where the wind moves freely. Desert land that holds the silence of centuries. Bodies of water that feel less like attractions and more like gateways. Not all nature is equal. Some places are loud with human intention, polluted by tourism or burdened by emotional residue. Others feel like the earth has never been interrupted. That's where you want to be. That's where the earth remembers how to receive something sacred. Another powerful place is family land, ancestral grounds that hold energetic lineage. If your family has a connection to a specific piece of land that has been tended to with love and continuity, it may carry the vibrational resonance of your bloodline. That continuity can act like a spiritual tether, not to hold the soul back, but to provide a familiar launching point. Ancestors often serve as guides in the transition. When ashes are returned to ancestral soil, it signals a kind of return to source, emerging with a deeper root system that supports the soul's evolution. Ceremonial altars are also beautiful options. These don't have to be grand or complex. An altar can be created in nature, at the base of a tree, beside a stream, on a mountain path. What makes it powerful is your intention. When you create a space with conscious awareness, with symbols of the elements, with offerings, with words of release, you're not just placing ashes somewhere. You're opening a portal. You're telling the soul, this is a doorway. You're telling the earth, I honor your role in this. You're telling yourself, I choose to let go with reverence. The role of blessing cannot be overstated. Words carry frequency. Sound shapes vibration. Before scattering ashes, speak. Whisper if you must. Use the language that feels real to you. It could be a prayer, a chant, a simple thank you. The words themselves don't need to be perfect. What matters is their energy. Speak to the soul, speak to the land. Speak to the space between worlds. Let your voice become the bridge, let your presence become the ceremony. When intention is clear, even the smallest act becomes holy. And don't forget closure, not the kind that ends a chapter, but the kind that acknowledges transformation. The scattering of ashes is not a final goodbye, it's a sacred handoff. A moment where you say, I trust you to continue now. After the ashes are released, stay a moment longer, sit in silence. Let yourself feel what has shifted. Let the soul feel your release. There is a deep peace that comes when nothing more needs to be said, only felt. Some people ask whether it's okay to scatter ashes in multiple places. The answer lies in your intention. If each location is chosen consciously, with the soul's journey in mind, not just your memories, then yes. A soul is not limited by geography, it's limited by vibration. Multiple locations can be beautiful if each one is energetically supportive. But if scattering becomes fragmented, based on unresolved grief, or pressure from others, or symbolic gestures that lack depth, it can dilute the clarity. Less is more, when done with presence. And what if you've already scattered ashes in a place that now feels wrong? Take heart. Energy can be realigned. Go back, if you can. Bring your presence. Offer prayer. Shift the frequency. And if you can't return physically, return spiritually. Send light. Call on guides. Speak words of release. The soul is not bound to dust, it's bound to energy. You can still open a path for it to rise. What matters is not perfection, it's awareness. The truth is, you already know where the right place is. Maybe you haven't visited it yet. Maybe it doesn't have a name, but you'll know it when you find it. It will feel quiet, not in sound, but in energy. It will feel like something has been waiting. It won't ask you to remember, it will ask you to release. That's the signal. That's the yes. That's the place where the earth says, I will carry them from here. When you choose a location like that, you're not just giving back to the earth. You're giving the soul a clean start, a place to realign, to dissolve into the universal, to shed all the identities it no longer needs. You are, in that moment, not just someone grieving, you are someone guiding, and there is no greater honor than to be the one who opens the gate, who steps aside, who says, rise now, I love you enough to let you go. This is what it means to scatter with wisdom, to choose light over memory, to choose clarity over comfort, to choose evolution over tradition. When you do that, the act becomes more than ritual. It becomes a prayer woven into the land itself, a signature of love that echoes through dimensions, and in that love, in that sacred clarity, the soul finds its way, not because it is pushed, but because it is finally free to go. What if I told you that the greatest act of love isn't holding on, it's letting go with wisdom? That real love, the kind that transcends time and body and name, is not about preserving what was, it's about honoring what is becoming. You see, when someone you love passes on, the first instinct is often to cling tighter, to their photos, to their voice in your memory, to the box of ashes you swear still carries a trace of who they were. That instinct comes from a sacred place, from the heart's ache to stay connected. But if you lean in more deeply, past the ache, past the fear of forgetting, you'll find another truth waiting. A truth that says, the soul you loved is not lost, it is rising, and it's asking you to help it rise. Letting go is not abandonment, it is not detachment, it is not the cold removal of something precious. Letting go, when done with intention and clarity, becomes the most sacred offering you can make. It says to the soul, I trust your journey, I honor your next becoming. I will not tether you to my pain, nor chain you to my past. I will bless your path with the power of my love, not the weight of my grief. And in that moment, you become more than someone mourning, you become someone awakening, someone who understands that death is not the end, it is the threshold. But to stand at that threshold with wisdom requires courage. It means feeling every layer of your sorrow without letting it cloud your choices. It means recognizing when you're making decisions from memory, and when you're making them from awareness. Scattering ashes, holding ceremonies, choosing final resting places, these are not just acts of closure, they are transmissions. They tell the soul, "This is how I see you now. This is where I believe you are ready to go." And if those acts are laced with fear, with clinging, with confusion, the soul feels it. But if they are infused with reverence, with clarity, with peace, the soul begins to rise with ease. Imagine, for a moment, that love isn't something you give, it's something you become. It radiates from you like light. And when someone passes on, that light doesn't need to dim, it needs to shift. To lift, to become less about presence and more about blessing, less about proximity and more about permission. Because real love does not bind, it liberates. It does not say, "Stay here with me forever." It says, "Go where you must, and I will still love you there." This shift in perspective is powerful. When you no longer see the release of ashes as losing someone, but as giving their soul a path of light, everything changes. You no longer look for places that feel comforting to you. You seek places that feel free for them. You no longer carry their ashes around in an urn because you need to feel close. You choose to create a space in your own heart where their memory lives untethered, and instead of asking, "How do I hold on?" you begin to ask, "How do I help them soar?" That question alone is transformative. It takes you out of survival mode and into sacred purpose. It gives meaning to the pain. It makes the ritual of release something profound. You are no longer just someone grieving. You are now someone guiding. And every act you take from that place becomes infused with light. You become a midwife for the soul's next birth. There is a beauty in that role. A quiet, humbling beauty. Because the truth is, every soul longs to return to source, and every act of clinging delays that return. But every act of conscious release accelerates it. You are not erasing them when you scatter their ashes with awareness. You are helping them remember who they truly are. And in doing so, you remember who you truly are too. A steward of sacred transitions, a witness to the soul's expansion, a living embodiment of love that chooses liberation over possession. And yes, it will hurt, there's no way around that. Grief is the price we pay for having loved deeply, but grief can be holy. It can be the fire that tempers your wisdom, that softens your heart, that makes your love even more expansive. Let it move through you. Let it cleanse the parts of you that still believe love must hold on tightly. Let it teach you that love is strongest when it opens its hands and trusts. That is how you walk with reverence. That is how you honor a soul's journey, not with clinging, not with fear, but with the quiet power of knowing that what is eternal cannot be lost, that their essence is not in the urn, or the ashes, or the memory of their voice. Their essence is in the love that lives on inside you, in the choices you make to free them, in the way you speak to the sky and feel them speak back through silence. When you choose a place of release that aligns with sacred intention, when you bless it with your presence and offer your love as a light to guide them, you are not just letting go, you are opening a doorway. You are saying to the soul, "Go where you are called, rise as you were meant to, and know that my love walks beside you, unbound, eternal, and free." Let this be your ultimate act of love. Not the preservation of what was, but the support of what comes next. Not the fear of separation, but the celebration of transformation. And know this: the more you let go with wisdom, the more deeply you are connected. Because in truth, love never ends. It only evolves, from presence to essence, from holding to honoring, from memory to movement. So take your time, feel everything. But when the moment comes, when the wind stills, when the land softens, when your heart speaks louder than your pain, let go. Scatter not just ashes, but your fear, your doubt, your need to cling. And in their place, offer light, offer peace, offer freedom. Because that is what love does when it remembers its power. It does not bind, it blesses, it does not hoard, it offers, it does not mourn without end. It transforms mourning into meaning, pain into prayer, memory into momentum. And in that space, both you and the soul you love are made whole again. Let that be your legacy. Not just how you loved in life, but how you loved through death. How you chose to become the one who opened the gate, who stood in the threshold and said, "You are free now, rise." And in saying that, in meaning it, in trusting it, you rise too.